Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about eye doctor to entrepreneur with Dr. Rob Sambursky on the OI Show. Welcome, everybody. And we have a special guest here. And I always love talking to individuals who have mastered the healthcare side of things from physician standpoint, and then seeing gaps in places where they feel we could actually enhance patient care and get into the industry side of things as well too. And there's no better example of that in the profession than Dr. Rob Sambursky. So Dr. Sambursky, please give us a little bit of a background on your background, where you started, where you currently practice, and what your current company is.
Well, first, Mile, thanks for inviting me to participate. It's great to be here. Known you for a long time, so it's a pleasure to see you hosting a show and being innovative yourself. I have a history of sort of forming businesses. I had my first one actually in high school. I was running a baseball card business, even though I was a soccer
Really?
and basketball player, but it turned out to be pretty successful. We even had a mail order out of my basement. Subsequently, I went to get a master's in medical sciences, which I thought would help me get into med school. What I realized is it actually gave me the discipline to do research and learn a variety of different things that maybe wasn't strong in during college.
Yep.
Ultimately, I went to med school and then did a medical internship. And while I was an intern, my father called me and said, "Hey, Rob, I have access to really interesting technology where people are touching surfaces like desks. And in the human resource setting, they're looking for metabolites of cocaine and heroin. Do you think there'd ever be an application in eyes?" Why my father would be asking me this is my father and grandfather and brother are all ophthalmologists. I have an uncle that was an ophthalmologist, another uncle or cousin that's an ophthalmologist. And so I was sort of destined to go into ophthalmology. I joke and say I have an autosomal dominant gene. I do have a recessive brother who's a dentist. And then ultimately,
Sorry to hear that, Rob.
well, ultimately, uh, when my father posed this question, I knew that I would have an opportunity to go to Will's and take advantage of seeing very unique patient base. And it was a great chance to take a technology. And while I didn't have the financial wherewithal, I convinced my brother and father to take a leap of faith and support me financially, and we worked out a deal with the company that had the human resource tests and said, we're making these diagnoses of conjunctivitis, and we really don't know if it's a virus or a bacteria. And that was the impetus of the very first test, the RPS adeno detector. And then ultimately, I got
Wow.
more and more involved on the company. I started off just as a founder and medical director, and then eventually worked my way up to chief medical officer to president and chief medical officer, and then eventually CEO of RPS Diagnostics.
So Rob, that's and I didn't realize that's how that technology came to be. Now, does your father or anybody else that was ophthalmologists in your family, did any of them do anything like you're doing right now with these technologies? Or were they kind of more s what I would consider standard clinicians or surgeons?
So they were more clinical based. They were supporting me on the intellectual side and the emotional support of starting a
Yeah,
company and
I
being
bet.
more of a leader in the company. I made the decision that I was going to split time between the actual commercialization of a company and being a clinician. I never wanted to give up the clinical aspect for a couple reasons. One, I really believe in patient care. I hope one of the things that comes across when people meet me is that I really want to improve patient care. And if I can have my fingerprint on trying to do that nationally, internationally, that's a win because I can affect more people this way. Second to that is I never want to offer a technology or even an investment for that matter that I'm not completely familiar with. I haven't tried, used, feel comfortable with. And so, being a clinician and having real patient interactions, if you were to say, "Hey, Rob, how do you do this? I'm having issues with this product," or reimbursement seems weird, I can tell you the magic words. In my practice, this is how I do it. And I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
be an expert and, more importantly, a supporting cast to the people who are using the technology.
Well, Rob, I would even assume too that, like, that's your window to the world of where you're seeing gaps in care, where you're caring for these patients and you wish I could do XYZ. I mean, even the impetus with that first test, I think used to be called what, the Adeno Plus, and now it's kinda gone through a few different iterations of names and different owners and things like that, but, I mean, even initially, it was born from a need, and I think that's the coolest part about you, Rob, is that you're seeing these needs and you're seeing the technologies that are available and saying, "How can we match the technologies that we have that aren't necessarily built for this and now fitting them into our clinical practices," and you get a chance to test them firsthand. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the cool part about you is you get to see that firsthand.
There's no question that's the part I like the best. I think that there's nothing more authentic than recognizing a clinical need, finding something that you can adapt to fix that problem, and then help educate people on the benefits of that. That's kind of like having a baby or an idea and bringing it forward. In my career, I've had the opportunity to actually be more on the inventive side and create the intellectual property myself and take the ideas and start them. It's really interesting now at Defy, it's different because we had an existing technology that was being used on the wound care side of the world. And now we're adapting it to eye care. And it's not completely easy to
Well,
transfer things. And we had to go through a whole process to figure that
yeah.
out.
Well, that's actually part of the thing I wanted to really kind of spend the bolus of the time on, Rob, is so now you're part of Defy and share with the audience kind of what your role is at the company and share with the audience really kind of what it is and what's the unmet need that you're seeking out and what's the products and the technologies that you're currently delivering to us for those that may not necessarily have familiarity with the company.
So, as I've mentioned, I am a practicing cornea specialist, but I wear two hats at Defy. I'm the chief executive officer, but I also serve as the chief medical officer. And so that really allows me to handle the medical affairs as well as provide the vision and lead the commercialization of the company. And so, what Defy is doing right now is we're providing what I consider are innovative decellularized biologic solutions for ocular surface disease and ocular surgery. And what that ultimately means is that we've been able to take technology that's existed in the past, all placental derived tissue like amniotic membranes or umbilical
Mhm.
cord or chorionic plate, and take a process where we're able to decellularize, which means we remove the epithelium, the stroma, and all of the fibroblast layers, leaving just the basement membrane of the amnion, just the basement membrane of the umbilical cord, and just the basement membrane of the chorionic plate. And these particular placental based tissue have the ability to integrate into a corneal or conjunctival wound.
So, Rob, I want to pause for just a second here because I want a little bit more clarification here. And I've heard you talk about this before, but you always emphasize decellularized. One, it is a dry membrane. So, is it unique to have something that's decellularized? Are you one of the only ones that are doing it, or is it a very common thing to do? And if you're one of the only ones that are doing it, what makes the decellularized dry membranes unique?
So I actually look at amniotic membranes in three categories. I look at it more functionally related. You have cryopreserved grafts that basically take a tissue in a moment in time and they freeze it. Then you have dehydrated, which basically removes all of the water. It's usually done through a cryo method of lyophilization or freeze drying or a lot of heat. there's another opportunity. And what we do is kind of a blended approach. We mechanically remove all of the epithelial cells, all of the stroma, and all the fibroblasts. That's the mechanical decellularization. But then through an air drying process without any heat, without any freeze drying, we actually allow it to dehydrate. So what happens now is I have preserved the amniotic membrane basement membrane. So it's decellularized. So we call it decellularized basement membrane. And that offers really unique properties. For one, we are the only one that has this particular technology. It's all patent protected because it's a novel process to be able to do this. But having a functional matrix scaffold does a couple of things. It preserves the laminin, the fibronectin, and the GAGs, which are proteins. And because there's no devitalized cells, it'll stick really well onto a defect. Once it sticks, it's a scaffold for cells to adhere to and then to migrate across. And what we can demonstrate is that that removal of the cells leads to a more efficient cell mediated process. That means the sticking, the migration, the proliferation, and ultimately some of the resulting cytokines and growth factors occur in a more efficient way.
So, Rob, this decellularized process that you're describing, again, is this something that you guys it's you mentioned a few times a patent around this process. Are you really the only company that's doing it this way, the way that you're describing?
Within eye
For
care,
the eye.
within eye care, we are the only ones. So we have a partnership with a company called Cellularity. We were able to bring that technology into eye care.
So take us back. Like when you saw what was currently out there and you said, "Man, we need something better in eye care." What was that impetus? What was that inflection point for you where you said, "We need something different. We need something better with how we're doing this, and I see a gap in this care, and I think we have an opportunity here to improve patient care."
So I want to start off by complimenting BioTissue and Procera for coming up with a great idea and having a ring around a product to ensure that they had amniotic membrane tissue to sit on the cornea. It's a great idea and it functionally works really well. They created a category and props to them. What I always struggled with is that I don't practice full time. And if patients received a Procara, many times they were uncomfortable. They didn't like the actual device in their eye. Sometimes they expulsed it. Sometimes I couldn't put it in if they have narrow fissures. And so I felt like it was a great product with some challenges. At the same time, I tried dehydrated membranes. They would move all over the place. Sometimes they were where I left it, sometimes they weren't. If I used it under a contact lens, especially in my practice that has a lot of severe dry eyes, autoimmune based dry patients, they didn't tolerate the contact lens very well. There's a higher risk of immune reactions, pain, discomfort. And I felt like there was an opportunity to sort of get better healing and eliminate some of the adverse events. And I'm using adverse events in air quotes because they're not terrible, but they're just things that are creating issues with the patient care. And so when the decellularization opportunity sort of came to be, we felt like this was perfect.
Mm,
Decellularized basement membrane
mhm.
sticks really well to the ocular surface. We have a three-layer graft, so it can, on paper, produce better uh, acquisition to the surface, meaning it's going to adhere, it's going to lead to better migration in proliferation, and it's bidirectional. There's no side. You don't have to worry
Yeah.
about which way is up or down. And because
Mhm.
it's thicker, it's going to last a little bit longer and it's going to produce a higher level of cytokines or growth factors over time just because of the nature of it being there longer. So that scaffold will persist. There's more durability. And ultimately, we felt like one of the great ideas with Procura is keeping it in position. If we're decellularized, it's going to maintain its position. And if we could couple that with either a pressure patch or even a dissolvable collagen shield for those that didn't want to be pressure patched, we could provide a situation that would bathe the entire ocular surface with all the potential byproducts of the healing and give a scaffold that stays in place for the cells to migrate. And we thought that it really met an unmet need in the space.
That's great, Rob. And you have the research to prove it and to show it. It's not only one of these things that are theoretical. I mean, you obviously have the papers to prove that this works the way that you were hoping and intended that it would, correct?
So there are lots of papers. There are many studies that have looked at animal data where they stripped away the epithelial cells and they show that the lack of epithelial cells leads to better binding, that orientation matters. There are benchtop studies that look at either a decellularized compared to cryopreserved compared to conventional dehydrated, which look at things like viability, adhesion, migration, proliferation, and even the cytokines. And it shows there's a more efficient process that occurs with a decellularized product.
That's great, Rob. So with all that being said, you have a company here, and it it kind of makes the rest of us that are just caring for patients in our offices seem a little bit inferior, but you're kind of doing both here, which is great. Did you wanna share anything or what future plans might be with your company? What directions are you looking for in the future with Defy? What does it look like in the next 1, 3, 5 years?
So while the decellularization that we just talked about was primarily driven by Biovance and Biovance Ocular 3L as the primary decellularized basement membrane that we use for dry eye, neurotrophic keratitis, corneal dystrophies, microbial keratitis, and pterygium surgery, we have an opportunity in the future to target the eyelids with a human connective tissue that specifically works as a flowable tissue. It's chorionic plate and it's used for chronic glandular disease. So if you think about
Wow,
meibomian gland dysfunction, those are
wow.
sebaceous glands. They have issues with uh, how people heal those glands. And ultimately, we believe there's an opportunity to use interfill as a way to support the glandular rejuvenation.
Oh, that's great. So you guys are really focusing in heavy on ocular surface and advanced ocular surface care. I love that, Rob. Well, listen, before we part ways here, anything else that you wanna leave the audience with?
Well, I think that one of the areas that we're really excited about is neurotrophic keratitis. And while we were talking about dry eye and advanced dry eye, I think that there is a lot of compelling data out there that says any amniotic membrane works well in neurotrophic keratitis. But what we're really seeing with the decellularized basement membrane is significant data that improves corneal sensitivity, and we think that that's got a significant role in the whole protocol for helping people get better from a chronic condition that oftentimes leads to visual disturbances and loss of vision that's permanent. So, if there's a way to implement decellularized basement membrane treatment earlier in the life of a patient with early or subclinical NK, I think we potentially might be able to preserve vision where otherwise perhaps people would have lost it.
That's great, Rob. Well, listen, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and being part of this podcast. I think this was great for everybody on the call and just getting insights into everything that you're working on. I think this is great. And I love when the clinician melds into an entrepreneur and really gives us tools that help us care for better. Rob, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well, I really appreciate it, Mule, and right back at you. I think from one innovator to another.
And thank you all for joining us on this episode of The OI Show.